Well, hello, and welcome back to my nightmare. So, I've been a huge fan of the slasher genre for most of my life. I think it started with Friday the 13th and sort of went on from there. And believe it or not, I've only recently learned that slashers were predated and inspired by a type of Italian horror called Giallo, or Gialli for plural. So, I recently started to watch some Gialli films, and the ones that I have seen, I can definitely notice both the similarities and the differences between the two genres. And so for this video, what I'd like to do is give a brief overview of a few films that I've seen and just make a note of some of the giallo elements and some of the slasher elements of each. But first, I'm going to quickly mention some of the major tropes of each genre. For example, gialli tend to be whodunit films where there's a murder mystery with a subsequent hunt for the killer. And the focus actually tends to be on the people investigating the mysteries instead of the killer. However, the killers in these films usually do have a few notable characteristics. A lot of them wear ski masks, and a lot of them also wear black gloves. In addition, in a lot of gialli films, the camera will actually take the killer's first-person perspective, putting the audience directly in the place of the killer as they're doing the murders. And also, I've noticed that gialli tend to take place in the city where it's densely populated, whereas slashers will usually take place either in the suburbs or the countryside. Like Halloween is in the suburbs, Friday the 13th is in the countryside. And then slashers also tend to focus on the killers themselves. And slashers also tend to have a much higher body count. And the actual killings are much more exaggerated and more gruesome. In fact, the gruesomeness of the killings is part of the allure of slasher films. Okay, so now that we know some of the generic features of each genre, I'm going to go over 5 giallo films that I've seen, and I'm just going to say a few things about each one.
Look out, Bruno!
Blade in the Dark is a 1983 film directed by Lamberto Bava. Of all the movies on this list, A Blade in the Dark has the fewest slasher elements. This has a classic giallo whodunit formula in which there's all this mystery that's built up around a killer's identity. Essentially, there's a music composer who's living and working in this Tuscany villa, and there is someone else there stalking and killing people, and the composer is trying to discover information regarding what's going on and why. However, the killer in this movie is not wearing a ski mask, and they also do not have black gloves. There's also a couple killings in this movie that are quite gruesome, especially the kill in the bathroom scene. There's lots of blood, and it sort of reminds me of a slasher. But I really liked this movie, and I'd definitely recommend it. Orso is a 1973 film directed by Sergio Martino, and this film has some serious slasher elements to it. However, it still retains many giallo elements as well. The plot is centered around these murders that are happening in and around this college campus. The killer looks exactly how you would expect in a giallo, with a ski mask and black gloves. In addition, the mystery surrounding the killer's identity is a major component of the plot, which is what you'd expect in a giallo. However, the body count is very high for a giallo at 11, and some of the kill methods and the fact that the killer dismembers some of the bodies is very similar to what you'd see in a slasher. In fact, this movie did remind me of a 1982 slasher called Pieces. But I really enjoyed this movie, especially the final act, which had a lot of tension. There's something about these giallo directors in that they're able to create a lot of tension with their cinematography. It's a real work of art.
I've read all your books, Mr. Neal. The book deals with a murder committed with an old-fashioned open razor, right? This girl, too, was killed with a razor, and your book's pages stuffed into her mouth.
Tenebrae is a 1982 film directed by Dario Argento. For the premise, there's an American author who's promoting his latest murder mystery novel in Rome. And there is this black-gloved assailant who is inspired by this author's novel and begins killing people. And in typical Giallo fashion, the writer, along with the detectives, attempt to unravel the mysteries surrounding these killings. During many of the stalking sequences and killings, the camera takes the killer's first-person perspective, putting the audience directly in place of the killer. For example, one victim accidentally stumbles inside of the killer's house, and she is subsequently chased out of the house and through the garden, and this scene is shot from the axe-wielding maniac's point of view. And similar to the previous film Torso, the aspect of this movie that reminds me of a slasher is the very high body count. It seems like there's a murder about every 15 minutes or so, and there's a total of 12. Also, some of the killings are very gory, particularly near the end when one victim actually has their arm chopped off and blood just starts gushing everywhere. If you're a fan of slashers, I definitely think you like this movie.
Hauled up on it as hard as he could. A little hasty, but as butchery goes, perfectly effective.
Ripper is a 1982 film directed by Lucio Fulci, and this seems to be one of the few films in this genre that takes place in the United States. The premise is of a maniac killer who's stalking the streets of New York City, attacking and butchering women, and there's a police detective who teams up with a psychoanalyst and they attempt to track down this vicious killer. And what stood out to me about this movie was that the killer was not secretive and instead was a lot more menacing. Usually in giallos, the killer is very mysterious, very secretive, but in this film, the killer actually calls the police on the phone and taunts them. The atmosphere of this film I thought was very dirty and sleazy, and some of the killings are ultra violent. There's this one scene where a victim is being tortured by having her eyeball sliced with a razor blade. Even the dialogue is a bit shocking. In one scene, when the coroner is making a comment to the police officer about one of the killings, he says something like, "He used a blade, stuck it up her joy trail, and slit her wide open." And I'm thinking, what the F is a joy trail? Whatever it is, check out the New York Ripper. A Bay of Blood is a 1971 film directed by Mario Bava, and I almost want to say that this movie is a slasher and not a giallo. And that's significant because it came out before Black Christmas and before Halloween. The reason I want to consider this a slasher is because the plot does not really focus on the hunt for the killer, and there are actually more than one killers in this movie. The movie takes place at this lakeside property. In the movie, the lakeside property is referred to as the Bay. The first part of the movie just follows a group of teenagers who wander around the Bay and are each viciously killed off one by one. The second half of the movie sort of switches gears, and it tells the story of a group of people who are all fighting amongst each other over who gets to inherit this lakeside property. And their greed leads to a series of brutal killings. In fact, there are 13 killings in this movie, which is the highest on the list. And in some of the kill scenes, you can definitely see there's a direct influence on the well-known series Friday the 13th. But yeah, after watching this movie, tell me again why this isn't considered the first slasher. Well, there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed my brief review of Giallo cinema, and please leave in the comments below some suggestions of additional Giallo films that I should watch. I haven't seen that many yet. Just last night I watched The Strange Device of Mrs. Ward, and that is an effed up but very fantastic movie. So please let me know some of your recommendations.